Okay, so here we are. We've finished up all but one of the landmarks on the cranial bones. Now we're going to start taking a look at the facial bones, and here's the first facial bone. This is the mandible. Okay, so the mandible has two regions. It has this lovely C-shaped region, which is the mandibular body. That's the section that has the teeth in it. Okay. And then on each side it has this broader, flatter portion, and this flatter portion on each side is the mandibular ramus. Okay, now the ramus has two important protrusions from it. The posterior one that is broader and has a nice smooth surface. This is the mandibular condyle. This is the piece of the mandible that fits into the mandibular fossa on the temporal bone to create the hinge joint that allows us to open and close our mouth using our mandible. Okay, and then the other piece here that's pointier and doesn't have the nice smooth surface of the condyle is the coronoid process. Okay, and the coronoid process is a location for muscle attachment. The corner of the ramus on its inferior edge is the mandibular angle. Okay, and this you can feel if you're palpating your mandible at the inferior edge. You can feel that corner. Okay, now there are two openings associated with the mandible. One is in the body. That is this one here, the mental foramen. And there's one on the internal surface of the ramus. That is this one, the mandibular foramen. Okay, now both of these openings are important to dentistry. The mandibular foramen is the opening that allows the nerve to come through that innervates your teeth in your mandible. So if you're getting a shot of Novocaine, it's coming into this area to deaden this nerve so that there's no sensation in your teeth as they're being worked on, which is a good thing. Okay, now the mental foramen is important to dentistry because it can give you some problems if you have your teeth removed. So you'll notice that there's this distance here between where the mental foramen is and this edge where the bone meets the teeth, and this edge is called the alveolar margin. Okay, now this distance between the alveolar margin and the mental foramen is really the bone that is holding the roots of your teeth in your mandible. Now if all of these teeth get removed, there's no reason really for this bone to hang around, so a lot of it degenerates. Okay, especially if you have someone that doesn't get dentures, because if you have dentures, then you continue to stimulate this bone so it hangs around. Okay, so if you don't get the dentures and you say, oh, I'm going to wait maybe 2 or 3 years and then I'll have the money to get my dentures. Well, the bad news is that in that time, most of this bone is going to degenerate. So instead of having a nice distance between the superior edge of your bone and the mental foramen, you now have almost no distance. So when you do decide to get those dentures, you put them in, and guess what? They're sitting right on top of this nerve emerging from the mental foramen, and not very comfortable. My dad actually did this, and he decided to get his dentures when I got married, and all the pictures of him at my wedding, he looks miserable because he was actually in a lot of pain from his teeth. Okay, now the only other landmark on the mandible is right here at the anterior midline. This is the mandibular symphysis. A symphysis is a place where structures have fused together. Okay, and this is the location where the mandible growing from one side fuses with the mandible growing from the other side during development. Okay, and in some individuals it will have an indentation in it. So those of you who admire John Travolta's indented chin, it's because he has that type of mandibular symphysis.